Welcome back to College Football Addiction. Jamie Bradford. We're going to talk a little bit of South Carolina A&M today. Inside the Gamecocks. Jamie, I appreciate you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you. Always glad to be here. And it's almost November, TJ. This season, like every year, it goes quick.
Yeah, well, not quick enough for some of us. So I'm
Hey, I've been there, man. Been there. I got it. I get
wake
it.
me up when November ends
Hmm.
is the mantra around here. But talking a little South Carolina A&M this weekend. A&M in an interesting spot, benching a quarterback and then putting a backup in who has played really well twice now. Like he played really well on the road at Florida.
Yeah.
That one due to an injury, and played really well in the second half against LSU. What's the prep look like for South Carolina, knowing that if I'm Elko, I obviously have both at my disposal. What are the thoughts there on what you may see this weekend?
Well, I do think you'll see both quarterbacks. I don't know who they'll roll out. I think our hunch around here is that Marcel Reed will get the start, which being a freshman on the road, under the lights in a 80,000 seat environment, against one of the best defenses in the league, if not the country, certainly will be a challenge for him. South Carolina's defense is good, and this will be the most or the best one he's seen this year. As would it be for Connor Wegman, who was the quarterback 2 years ago when A&M came in, and Xavier Legette took the opening kickoff 100 yards
Yeah.
down the sideline with one shoe on, by the way. And Carolina got their first win in the series against the Aggies. So, yeah, I mean, you got to prepare for both. It traditionally around here, it's been heartburn when you think about dual threat quarterbacks. They have really done a number on Carolina over the years, but not this year. This defense up front is really special, and it's allowed the second and third levels to do their thing. So, we'll see what it looks like, but they're preparing for both.
Yeah, this starts a stretch where we talked in the off season about, man, what's the pressure look like on Beamer? Can you find a way to a bowl? I mean, this starts a stretch where South Carolina could really take this from okay, well, you survived another year, to maybe like, wow, this was a pretty special year, and could have been even more special had a couple of things broke your way.
Mhm.
It all kind of starts with A&M, but just looking big picture, I mean, there's not a game left on the schedule that they can't compete in, or they couldn't go out and win. Now, I don't know that I'm predicting them to go 5-0 down the stretch, and South Carolina fans would certainly love that. But this back half of the schedule, maybe not as daunting as it looked earlier in the year. Maybe pretty open for them to have a lot of success.
It's so interesting because A&M, you could argue right now, A&M and Clemson certainly are the most complete teams left on the schedule. I would say Clemson probably is a little bit ahead of where the Aggies are, but both are very complete football teams. Um, Look what Vanderbilt's doing.
Yeah.
This and the Gamecocks have to go to Nashville, and that's no longer what it was at all. They have totally changed the thinking when you approach that game and how you're going to approach it. And Vanderbilt, shoot, they almost beat Texas last weekend. So
Sure.
they're for real. They're playing on a bunch of energy, and then you got Wofford in there, and you got Missouri in there. I'm not so sure that Missouri is a very good football team. Now, with that said, A&M, Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Clemson clearly can all beat South Carolina, and South Carolina clearly can beat all of them. So it makes for a very interesting stretch. And I'll add this too. Not that in college football that you get mulligans from your fan base. We know what it's evolved into, TJ. Anytime you lose a game, it's fire everybody. Let's close the bridges and the whole 9 yards. But if there's one game left on the schedule that is forgiving to the fan base at South Carolina, or could be forgiven, it's that it's this weekend against A&M. Because if you ask any Carolina fan, they've lost. Think about this: they've lost 5 straight games against Missouri. People around here are tired of that.
Yeah.
So you're talking about 5 games left. 4 of them are meltdown mode losses if you lose. Vanderbilt, which even though Vanderbilt's having the year they're having, sitting there at 5-3, 2-2 in the league, you still don't want to lose to Vanderbilt, right?
Right.
Yeah, I just mentioned Missouri and the stretch that the Tigers are on, and Eli Drinkwitz is on against the Gamecocks. You certainly don't want to lose to a team like Wofford, and clearly you don't want to lose the Palmetto Bowl against the team from the Upstate. So those are all meltdown mode games if you get beat. This one this weekend would be a respectable loss if Carolina can't upset the Aggies at home on Saturday night. So it makes for an incredibly interesting November, and but one that's got a ton of opportunity for the Gamecocks to shoot up there and get 8-9, maybe more wins in the postseason.
You look at where South Carolina is coming off a bye in this game. Their last time they took the field, actually their last two times, they have I hate saying like a semi decent loss because we don't play the moral victory game around here, but they were this close to beating Bama or upsetting them, and then you look at where. The very next week, just beating the absolute tar out of Oklahoma, and Oklahoma has responded and played okay, right? Who did they go out and get a big win last week? Just thoughts on coming off the bye, where South Carolina is just in general. Obviously, A&M had to play a really tough game last week against LSU, in which they were victorious. But I think this does kind of set up well for South Carolina if they've it's the old adage of rest not rust, right, through the bye week. But coming off a big win, you get a little time to not be reading your own press clippings and get back to focus. And A&M playing a tough game last week. Just thoughts on how that matches all up.
Well, this team, and Coach Beamer mentioned it after the performance in Norman. They'd had enough. They've had enough. They've had enough of the silly mistakes. They've had enough of poor officiating. They've had enough of the frustration. They've had enough of the close but no cigar. They've had enough of that. In the LSU game, when they walked off the field, there was a bunch of people in the southwest corner of the end zone where South Carolina runs out of the tunnel as they were heading back to the locker room. Hundreds of Gamecock fans applauding, standing up, clapping for their guys for two reasons. One, they had laid it all on the line. But then also, 80,000 people that day saw what the rest of the country saw, which a lot of poor officiating that probably affected the outcome. And, I think they wanted that team to know, we've got your back. I go back to 2006 when Coach Spurrier was in his second year at South Carolina, and I vividly remember it being in the north end zone that night. And I was actually a student, and Carolina almost beat Auburn and should have beaten Auburn. They were number 2 in the country, and they should have beat them. And had a drop pass and a couple of things that affected the outcome of the game. It was a clean game, but just didn't do a couple of things that would have given them the win. And everybody stood up and clapped for the team as they left. And Coach Spurrier afterwards in the press conference said, we can't be clapping around here when we lose. Like we lost the game. Appreciate all the Gamecock fans for supporting their team, but what are we excited about when we lose? Like, we have to change that mentality. We have to win these games. Yeah. And so, fast forward to where they are now, it feels like a very similar situation. Coach Beamer didn't, of course, come out and tell the fan base not to clap for his team. That's not his thing, and he wouldn't do that. But the football program itself is like, we've had enough pats on the back of, hey, man, you're getting close. Like, let's get there. And, defensively, obviously they've got a defense that can provide that ammo week in and week out. And it's going to probably have to do it again this weekend. Offensively, if they can just have some sort of consistency out there, TJ, and not shoot themselves in the foot and have a little creativity, that's enough to win every game that's left on the schedule with that defense. So, I think that they're motivated. They've got excellent leadership. They got a bunch of old guys. They've got the right mojo on this team, and hopefully that carries them through November.
What do you when you look at the offense, and A&M's got a pretty good defense, they've got a really good defensive line, and I was really interested to see how A&M would match up with a really good LSU offense, or an offense that had been really good. I know Nuss threw them, the ball too many times, and they had a lot of mistakes that made it a lot easier on A&M. But just thoughts on the way that South Carolina's offense, Sellers and the guys can match up with a pretty good A&M defense.
Yeah, A&M's and Coach Beamer pointed it out yesterday too in his press conference. You know, the things that A&M is. How about this? You know, I know we're talking defense, but on offense, it probably surprises some people to know that the Texas A&M Aggies lead the SEC in SEC games only now, because we get to this point, you know, 4 or 5 games into your league schedule. Let's start looking at those stats. That's how you judge football teams and how they're doing in their own conference. A&M leads the league in scoring at 33.4 points per game, right? And then you look at rushing offense. They average 211 yards per game on the ground on the offensive side. On the defensive side, rushing defense, they're number one in the SEC. They only give up 73.8 yards per game. So, I mean, you know, they're a line of scrimmage football team. And a Mike, who I have a lot of respect for Mike Elko, a Mike Elko coach football team. They're going to do the things that they need to do, stay fundamentally sound. You're not going to see a ton of penalties usually. You're not going to see a ton of turnovers and things like that. Like, they're going to do the little things right. And so if you're South Carolina, like, you have to be able to sustain the grind, and then you've got to be able to strike. Now, A&M will give up a big play. Their pass defense last weekend. I think they gave up like 405 yards or something like that to Nussmeier, who hasn't exactly been incredibly accurate, by the way. You know, and he throws a lot of balls away and keeps drives alive and stuff like that. He's a very smart quarterback, but Garrett Nussmeier hasn't, you know, been 65, 70% accurate or anything like that in his last 2 or 3 games. But you know, A&M of course also affects that up front. Lenore Sellers is actually a pretty accurate passer. The knock that was on him was the silly stuff, you know, holding onto the football loosely and taking sacks when you just can't take a sack. You're in field goal range. Man, you can't take one there. You got to get rid of the football. Those are all the young things. You know, he's a redshirt freshman. You know, we've watched redshirt freshmen play in college football for decades now. You know, they all do the same things, and then you got to grow through it. You know, I think what's disappointing, Carolina is last in college football in giving up sacks, TJ. It's just not good. Okay. And you can blame the offensive line. You can blame the tight ends and the running backs who've missed a lot out there on the perimeter. You can blame holding on to the football too long, both Robbie Ashford and Lenore Sellers. But that's kind of the issue, because you can't just blame one thing. Like, all of it has had issues. And so obviously that has to get fixed. But even beyond that, just getting some push in the run game, you know, and so that's what I feel like is very, very dangerous this weekend. They just don't get much push up there, and they've got one of the best running backs in college football in Rocket Sanders. I mean, the guy was an All-American 2 years ago. It's not like I'm making this up. Like, he can really tote the rock, and he needs just a little room. If he's just got a little room, he can get going in a hurry. And so, you know, I don't know. Obviously, I haven't been at practice, but you know, hopefully they have figured out some sort of creative ways to get him the football outside of the tackles instead of always kind of pinning it up in there between the guard and the center and making him do all the work. He's just got to get the football and keep Carolina's offense on the field so they can strike. And if they can find a way to be consistent in the run game, be consistent, move the ball forward, give themselves, you know, 4 down drives where you might have some 4th and 1s and 4th and 2s that they feel comfortable in picking up, they can hit big plays. And they have been hitting more big plays lately. So I think that's going to be a major key to the game this weekend, is the A&M defensive line versus the Gamecocks offensive line, and then, of course, vice versa. It's very much a line of scrimmage ball game.
Yeah. Do you have an X factor in this game? If things have gone well for South Carolina, give me an X factor that you expect to have had a really big or good day.
Yeah, well, look, I think the Carolina secondary is ready to go. You know, they're Nick Eamon-Warry right now is an All-American. Jelon Kilgore and O'Donnell Fortune are playing like all SEC guys. All of these dudes are going to the NFL. OD is going to be a draft pick this year. Nick Eamon-Warry is probably going to be a first rounder. And Jelon Kilgore still got another couple of years in school, but he's just lights out. So I think that if Carolina up front defensively is able to affect, it doesn't matter which quarterback's in there, but is able to affect them, you're going to see a mistake or two. The key is, can Carolina capitalize on those mistakes? This secondary is unbelievably confident. They're ball hawks, man. Their eyes are always on the quarterback. If you watch the Oklahoma game, the pick by OD in the end zone, What a play. I mean, that's just pure instinct, maturity. The guy who's played a bunch of football, reading the eyes, reading what they're doing offensively, making a break, and going and making a beautiful catch there in the end zone, right? That's what these guys are capable of doing. And they've done it against better quarterbacks than what A&M's going to roll out there this weekend. And that's no disrespect to either one of those guys. I've got a lot of respect for Connor Wegman and a lot of respect for Marcel Reed. But I think the X factor is the secondary, picking up on something or maybe once or twice in the ball game and getting a big couple of turnovers that can maybe help lean it into Carolina's favor.
It feels like to me a race to about 28. If either team was to get to 28, I'm not super confident that either team is just, the prolific offense that's going to, especially against these defenses that could get to 30, right? The score will be 38-35 now that I said that. But I do feel like 28 is kind of a magic number for both teams. If you can get there, it might be enough. Now, again, because I said that, it'll be high 30s. But I do feel like if you can get to that 4 touchdown mark, which I don't think is going to be necessarily easy. Like, I like both these defenses a lot, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is a little more low scoring, like a 21-17 or a 24-21 or something like that. But I do think 28's a number that I've kind of tagged for this game. Do you have a lean in this one? Do you have a prediction yet this early in the week?
Yeah, well, my number is 24, and it's that for a reason. Number one, both defenses and the lines of scrimmage. I do think it's going to be a grind of a football game. So I feel whoever gets to 24, I think probably is okay. But like you said, we'll look up and it'll be 41-40 or something ridiculous, and you're scratching your
6
head going,
turnovers and 3 pick sixes, a kick return touchdown, and everything else.
what happened here? Yeah, exactly. Shane Beamer teams generally have some strange scores,
Yeah.
safeties and 2-point conversions. They're
Exactly.
always, they're always looking. They do something when they kick extra points where they get a look every time they're going to kick an extra point. They get a look, and if you're giving it to them, just like what happened to Norman,
Yeah.
they'll just snap it to the up back, who was Mo Brown, and he'll just dive into the end zone and take 2 instead of 1. So they always are getting a look, and that's something that usually will, kind of make it look a little wonky when you see some of these 23-19s and 27-25s and stuff like that. Carolina's defense clearly an X factor too. They're ball hawks. They can score on that side of the football. They generate points. They obviously did it early in the Oklahoma game and left people scratching their heads just 5 minutes into it, wondering what in the world is going on in Norman, right? So I do think that it'll be more of a low scoring game. And here's a stat for you, and hopefully around here this trend continues. 7 night games for Shane Beamer, 6-1. And they've won 6 straight at Williams-Brice Stadium. And obviously that includes beating teams like Tennessee and beating teams like Kentucky. It's a dangerous place to be at night. Williams-Brice is obviously, I grew up in the ballpark, so I'm admittedly going to be a little bit biased, but I've been to a lot of SEC ballparks at night, a lot, and they are electric places to be. And this joint is right there in the thick of it with all of them.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to fans and coaches and players from other programs for years about what is it like to play at Williams-Brice Stadium at night, and they all say the same thing. It's something to see. So um, if A&M is obviously Connor Wegman, I want to say this very carefully, but I want to be, I don't want this to be degrading at all. I want to say it respectfully. A lot of people are really, really high on Connor Wegman, which is great. He's got a lot of talent. You don't get there by not being a talented kid. And I know he's had some bang ups, he's had some injuries and things like that, right? If he was that good, he'd be the starting quarterback.
Yeah.
Okay. He's been there for 3 years. Okay. So obviously he's having some issues. Now, could he snap out of it and be in the game on Saturday night and complete 25 of 30 for 350 yards? Absolutely. He sure could. He can embarrass Carolina in a hurry. A lot of people can do that to anybody. I think that it's going to be really interesting to see what they do with their quarterbacks when they're in the game, how they're trying to affect the game with each one. And obviously, I think Carolina's defense will be very prepared for both.
I uh, I find the spread really interesting. Top 10 team going on the road is just a 2.5 point favorite right now, I think. And man, in a really low scoring game, I kind of like the points. I know that's kind of crazy. I don't know that I necessarily am sure of either team winning, but I do kind of like the points. If you're giving me free points at home, I do kind of like it in a game that I think is going to be pretty low scoring. And the
Yeah.
old adage of, I mean, Spurrier used to say it, everybody used to say it, of two quarterbacks and all those things. So I kind of like the points. That's kind of my cop out political, not making an actual prediction, but I do like the points. So
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
say that.
yeah. And real quick, if you don't mind, I want to add something too about the Aggies. They've been coming to town now for 10 years, and very much remember the opening night of the SEC Network. It was a hot August 31st day at Williams-Brice Stadium. It was the first game. It was on a Thursday night, and Kenny Hill was their quarterback who transferred in from TCU,
Yeah.
and he promptly walked in and walked out a Heisman Trophy contender. They embarrassed South Carolina. Gamecocks were in the top 10 in the country entering that season, coming off of 3 straight 11-2s. It was a huge moment, and Carolina was just flattened. I mean, they were just flattened. But one of the things that I discovered that night is the Texas A&M Aggies have an outstanding fan base. People will joke about the cheerleaders, and rightfully so. It's a little interesting unless you know all about it, and I don't. So I try not to go down that road, but it's kind of strange to watch them do their thing. They have an outstanding fan base. I have a ton of respect for that institution and how they go about things. I think they've hired the right football coach in Mike Elko. They've got a football coach in there. He's going to win them a lot of games. Le'Veon Moss he's a player. Kid's going to be in the league. He's a great running back. Carolina's going to have their hands full with him, and also A&M TJ has been getting a little bit of flack about the schedule that they've played in the league. Okay, they're 5-0. They're the only undefeated team left in the SEC. They went to Florida and won. Florida is obviously having a down year. Maybe it can end up a little better than some people thought, but they're having a down year. They're not the Gators that we grew up with, right? Um, they squeaked by Arkansas in over there in Dallas in Jerry World, 21-17. Arkansas is that's a fighting group over
Yeah.
there. Okay, they beat up on Missouri, who I mentioned. I don't really think is that good. They went to Mississippi State and got everything that the Bulldogs could throw at them, and they got out of there by a 10-point victory. Mississippi State is not a very good football team. That was kind of their last hope of, can we get it turned around? This is where we do. They threw the kitchen sink at the Aggies. Obviously, it didn't land. And then last week, the second half ran all over LSU, 31 points in the second half. But I've heard people giving them flack about their schedule, and I totally disagree with that. And I'm obviously coming at this from a South Carolina side. Missouri was ranked in the top 10 when they played them. LSU was ranked in the top 10 when they played them. Okay. They hung 79 combined points on the board between those two teams and gave up 33. That's number one. Number two, you can't control who's good and not good on your schedule. You
Yeah.
just can't. And number three, we have seen, what did Alabama do at Vanderbilt? What did Ole Miss do against Kentucky? It is hard in this league, regardless of whether teams are better than we thought they were or worse than we thought they were. It is hard to sustain the consistency of the punches, and A&M has done that. They
Yeah.
have not had an off week. They've not had a bad week. They've not fallen asleep at the wheel. They have been very consistent. And you know what? If South Carolina or Alabama or anybody else out there was playing that schedule, they wouldn't be making excuses for their 5-0 record. I promise you that. So, we're not doing that around here. They've got everybody's attention in the state of South Carolina as being a top 10 playoff type team. It's going to be an extremely daunting challenge on Saturday evening. And if Carolina gets out of there with a win, they will have absolutely earned it against what I think is an excellent, well-coached football team who we've got a lot of respect for.
Yeah, a couple thoughts there, and then we'll wrap. But number one, I thought you were about to pull a Lee Corso where you just like build them up for 5 minutes and then say, but Gamecocks by 30, and then get out. So
I can do that.
that's the way it felt like it was building. So, and then second, yeah, on the schedule too, you even mentioned Florida, and you're not going to see me giving Florida a ton of credit just ever, even when they're really good. But they went into the swamp with a backup and just dominated them. And I know Florida's not good, blah, blah, blah. Florida's since that game though, won every game except for a loss on the road at Tennessee, which they should have won if Billy Napier wasn't their coach. They probably would have. So, Florida just absolutely dismantled Kentucky. They've looked a lot better offensively. It sucks what happened to Mertz, but with Lagway, their defense has looked better. They've shut down, they shut down Tennessee's rushing attack. They shut down UCF's rushing attack, which was one of the best in the country. And I know UCF's not great either, but they went into the swamp in a night game, and that game was not competitive. I know the final score, they scored late to make it look a little better. No, that game was I'm in full agreement. They're beating teams the way you're supposed to. And then again, Arkansas, Pittman and Napier were the coaches that everyone had fired before the year started. Pittman's going to save his job this year.
Yeah.
Arkansas is not. Mississippi State they lost to Georgia by 10 too. And Mississippi State's not even good, but every week in this conference, and I hate the cliches. Every week it just means all that stuff, but it really does. Again, when you've got Vandy and Mississippi State keeping games close with Georgia, come on, man. What do you want us to say? They're just going out and winning every week. They can win themselves into the playoff if they just they can, if they win the next few weeks. Their game against Texas won't even matter because they'll be already in the SEC championship. It don't matter. Aggie, they don't want to lose it, but they keep winning it. Nothing else really matters, but just keep winning games. And then if they go to Atlanta and lose by 40 to somebody, then maybe we'll say something. But come on, man, don't give me a break. You don't think A&M's going to give Texas? You don't think Texas? I know Texas has other things to worry about between now and then, but you don't think Texas is looking at that game maybe that's not the cupcake we thought it was earlier in the year. That is going to be a game. And so, I'm excited to continue to see what they do. And it's been fun to watch under year one too. What could he do in year 3 out there?
Yeah, and they got all kinds of money. Maybe Marcel Reed is the future at quarterback for them. That's, if you took a guy like maybe Garrett Nussmeier or something and put him on A&M's team, you're probably talking about an entirely different beast here. Wow. That's kind of their one thing. They've got good receivers. People might look at their numbers and think, well, they're really not that good, but that's not true. They've just had a difficult time getting them the football. They're leaning on the run game. They're a good football team. And like I said earlier, man, I have so much respect for college football. We don't know anything about college football anymore. The portal has changed everything. NIL has changed everything, TJ. You don't get to know these teams now until 4 or 5 games into the season and kind of really start to determine who's who and who could be better or worse or whatever it is. And so when you're able to put a consistent team on the field every week, that means a lot. That's number one. You had an excellent offseason in preparing for the year. But also, as I pointed out, you go to the Big Ten or you go to the ACC or the Big 12 or whatever league you want to go to, you can get punched in the face. There are great teams in every single league who can punch you in the face. In this league, it's the consistency of the punches. There's just so many. Ask Texas and Oklahoma. They're figuring that out right now. Hey guys, this is what we were kind of trying to tell you. It ain't easy. Then you start dealing with injury issues and things happen and you get halfway through the year and you're talking about one loss. Luckily, there's a 12-team playoff now, but one loss throws the whole thing on its rear end.
Yeah,
because you just keep getting punched, and at some point in time, you just can't come back up for air for a little while. So it is certainly a challenge. There's no doubt about it. And A&M is just they got a chance to have a really special year, but obviously, hopefully, South Carolina can maybe knock them off of that perch this weekend at Williams-Brice, and there'll be no undefeated teams left in the SEC.
Chaos scenario with all the 1 losses starts to ensue. So.
Have you seen the tiebreaker rules in the league?
I've actually been studying them. I've been doing an ACC series right now on it, and I actually just wrote out all. I did the entire I was up late last night doing all the Big 12 and I did all the Big 10 because it's actually every conference right now because there are no divisions.
Yeah.
Every conference has this going on right now. Like there's it's less so in the Big 12, but there are some fun scenarios that you can kind of get into. The Big 10 has it going right now and the SEC. So like I'm actually working on all of it right now
Yeah.
for the
Hey,
channel. It's
you
insane.
you know what's coming. Here in a few years, there's going to be somebody in a room somewhere who goes, maybe we should have divisions in these leagues. Well, that sounds like
Yeah.
a great idea. Charlie, where'd you get that? Well, it used to work. Well, maybe we should try that. It'll come
The
back.
the ACC has 4 undefeated teams at the top, and only one of them play. So it's just like, how you could avoid that is if you made these teams play each other. You could literally only end up with 2 undefeateds. Now, could you end up with 3 one-loss teams on one side? Absolutely, but at least your other champ. So, Jamie, I appreciate you for joining me, man. Where can people
Always.
follow you? Where can they find your work, bud?
Yeah, we just encourage everybody to please download our app. It's free, whatever device you've got. Chief Sports, that's our network, like Indian Chief Sports, and we've got all kinds of programming. Obviously, I'm the lead guy on Inside the Gamecocks, the show, which is live every day from 11 to 2. But we have so many other programs that are on there that people would really love. Great content, lots of live stuff, lots of pre-recorded stuff, and so on and so forth. So just download that app and or head to chiefsportsnetwork.com. You can find us there.
I appreciate you, buddy.
Yeah, man. Thank you.